Good evening, Castlers. Eladefo7 here again to bring you Let's Castle action, but before I do, don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to click on the bell icon, which will notify you when the latest Let's Castle video will be available. Now let's get to the game. This was a 24-hour per move daily time control game that took place in the third round of the Team Match Championship League. The game featured our very own DLH 7075, who had the white pieces against 3 Czech Fun Chess Club's Hershey 35 from India, who had black. The game was completed on March 23rd. Let's see what happened here. D starts out with pawn to e4. You then get pawn to e5 from Hershey 35, and then knight f3. Knight f5, wow, the Petrov defense, also known as the Russian defense. I rarely see this defense in amateur games, and I know it's a favorite defense of the super grandmaster Fabiano Caruana, arguably the best chess player in America right now. Petrov's defense immediately attacks white's unprotected e4 pawn while ignoring black's unprotected e5 pawn. Let's see how DLH 7075 attacks this. He plays knight c3, and with the play of knight c6, you now have the 4 knights game. Why do they call it that? Well, because you have 1, 2, 3, and 4 knights on the board. Makes sense. Bishop c4 is played by D, followed by bishop to e7. You get a kingside castle and a kingside castle. And then you get the following. Pawn to a3, rook to e8, pawn to d3, pawn to a6, pawn to h3, pawn to b5 from Hershey kicks the bishop to the b3 square. Pawn to h6 prevents the knight on f3 from hopping on g5 and attacking the f7 pawn twice. Now you get bishop to e3, pawn to d6, knight d5. D threatens the e7 bishop. Hershey moves it to safety. Pawn to c3. Then knight to e7 is a blunder because it leads to the winning line of knight takes f6 check. G takes f6, knight h4, f5, and queen h5. You have Hershey's king all hemmed up in the corner. You have the light squared bishop aiming at the king, dark squared bishop aiming at the pawn. Your queen is in a great spot and your knight is poised to pounce. However, DLH 7075 did not play knight takes f6 check. Instead, he played the passive bishop a2, which is a missed win. The computer thought it was too passive. Hershey then plays pawn to c6. Another blunder, and this time D doesn't miss his shot playing knight takes f6 check. The best move. Hershey recaptures. But then unfortunately, D follows that up with pawn to b4 instead of the best move, which was knight to h4. Like so. And as you can see, the eval bar has him at 3.43. Well, now 3.65. It's the better move. You know, chess is so similar to life, it's scary. You may get only one opportunity to prevail, and you have to take advantage of it because you may not get that chance ever again. But even if that is the case, ladies and gentlemen, and you find yourself making blunders, you must learn from your mistakes. Because again, chess is eerily similar to life. Let's move on. Hershey plays the great move of knight g6. So now that takes away from the knight h4 move D was supposed to play on the prior move. Hershey spotted it. So DLH 7075 took a deep breath, woosad, regrouped, and played bishop to b3. Pawn to f5, Hershey introducing a pawn break. Bishop to d2. Pawn to f4 closes the position. Pawn to a4, D looking to possibly open up the a file. Bishop to e6. Pawn to a5. The computer would have liked D to trade bishops on e6. The engine felt it was more advantageous. Let's check out the eval bar on that as I back up. Yeah, as you can see, yeah. Take here. Yeah, it moved slightly. Yeah, I guess we're nitpicking here. But let's move on. Pawn to a5. And then queen to f6 from Hershey. You then get pawn to d4 from white. Rook a c8. Rook b1. And then rook e d8, which is a mistake. And D is fortunate because if Hershey plays the better move, let's back it up here. If he plays the better move, E takes d4. Continue with the line, bishop takes e6, rook takes e6, knight takes d4, rook takes e4, queen to g4, and D would be down a pawn. But fortunately for him, that was not played. After rook e d8, DLH 7075 played queen e2, which connects his rooks. Good move. Pawn to d5 is a mistake because it leads to e takes d5, c takes d5, d takes e5, hitting the queen, queen to e7, and now DLH 7075 leads by 1 pawn. Rook b d1 from D, bishop to g7, rook f to e1, pawn to d4 from Hershey is going to lead to him losing material because D then plays the game-changing move of bishop takes e6. Hershey recaptures, equal trade, but then D swipes the pawn on d4 and he is now leading by 2 pawns. Well done. You then get rook to c4 from Hershey, queen d3 hitting the hanging knight on g6. Rook d5 is another mistake because you've just given up your knight for free. DLH 7075 had a commanding 5-point material lead now. And it was in this position, move 30 in fact, that Hershey put the candy bar down, waved the proverbial white flag, and you guessed it, capitulated. So great win from DLH 7075 as he won game 1 of 2. He ended up losing game 2 and settled for a split in that matchup. Let's Castle is currently leading as a team in round 3, 21-17 in fact, with 4 games remaining. It's looking good for Let's Castle, and I'm confident we will pull out a round 3 victory against 3 Czech Fun Chess Club. That's going to do it for this podcast this evening. I'm Eladef07 saying stay tuned, and I'll see you soon.